One wrong turn, one misstep, and suddenly survival was not just about skill, it was about trust in an unexpected companion. A bear appeared where fear should have been, and everything changed in a heartbeat. The early morning fog hung low over the jagged peaks, curling like smoke around the pines. Each step Henry took on the narrow mountain trail felt heavier than the last. His legs ached, his backpack pressed into his shoulders, and the silence of the wilderness pressed in around him. The map in his pocket was practically useless. The stream he had been following had vanished hours ago, swallowed by a canyon that seemed deeper than anything he had imagined. He paused, breathing hard, trying to listen beyond the crunch of his boots. The forest was alive, rustling leaves, distant bird calls, the occasional snap of a twig, but there was no human sound, no sign that he was anywhere near a road or a campsite. Panic whispered in the back of his mind. If I stay here, I'll be trapped, and alone. Henry's mind replayed his decisions over and over. He had underestimated the wilderness, ignored the signs, and now he was lost. Hunger was starting to gnaw at him, and water was a distant concern. But fear of the dark mountains, steep cliffs, and cold nights was worse. He adjusted his pack and forced himself to keep moving, telling himself, one step at a time. Hours passed, and the fog thickened, shrouding the forest in a ghostly gray. Then he saw it, a movement in the distance. Henry froze, heart pounding. A bear? It was impossible. Bears didn't usually wander so close to humans, did they? But there it was, large, shaggy, walking slowly along the ridge, glancing occasionally in his direction. Its presence was calm, not threatening, but every instinct in him screamed to retreat. Yet as he watched, something unexpected happened. The bear did not flee when it noticed him. Instead, it continued along the ridge, pausing now and then, almost as if it were waiting. Curiosity mingled with fear. Henry's survival instincts urged him to turn back, to hide, but an odd sense of trust began to creep in. The bear's movements were deliberate, measured, and there was a quiet intelligence in the way it observed its surroundings. I should follow it? He whispered to himself, though even saying the words felt absurd. A human following a bear? He shook his head, but instinctively he stepped onto a narrower path that seemed to align with the bear's route. The forest around him seemed denser, shadows stretching unnaturally, every sound amplified, the rustle of leaves, the distant snap of a branch under unseen paws. As he moved, he realized the bear was leading him through a natural corridor between cliffs and fallen logs. Every turn it made guided him past unstable terrain, cliffs that looked dangerously close, and sections where water pooled so deeply he might have gotten trapped. It was as if the animal understood the path in ways he could not. Hours melted into late afternoon, the fog lifting slightly, revealing glimpses of distant peaks glowing in the sun. Henry's legs were raw, but he was alive, and for the first time since morning, he felt a spark of hope. Then a sound, the crack of a branch, sharp and close, made him freeze. The bear stopped instantly, ears flicking, nose twitching. Henry realized that a second presence was near, maybe another bear or a predator. Fear surged again. He had no weapon, no way to protect himself if this was an aggressive animal. He stared at the bear, silently asking for guidance. And in that moment, the bear made a decision. It turned slightly, signaling him to follow another path that veered away from the danger. Henry obeyed, heart hammering, trusting the instinct he hadn't known he possessed. Minutes stretched. Every step was a lesson in observation, in patience, in humility. He noticed how the bear moved lightly, its paws careful on unstable rocks, how it sniffed the air before proceeding, how it seemed to sense danger before he could even see it. This was no mindless animal, it was a guide, a teacher in fur. And then, as the trail began to slope downward, a realization struck Henry like a cold wave. The bear wasn't just leading him, it was choosing him, as if deciding he was worthy of learning the forest's unspoken rules. His chest tightened with awe and a creeping sense of responsibility. I cannot fail to observe, to respect, or I may never make it out. The sun was dipping behind jagged peaks, shadows growing long. The forest seemed quieter, almost expectant, as if it, too, was watching this unusual partnership. Henry's stomach growled, a reminder that survival was still fragile. He looked back once. The bear's eyes met his, calm, unwavering, almost judging, almost encouraging. Then it turned and moved forward again, and he followed, understanding that the next moments would define whether he survived the night. As Henry rounded a bend, the path opened onto a sheer drop, a narrow ledge barely wide enough to walk. Below, the river thundered, foaming white, and above, the last rays of sunlight faded. He had to cross it, and the bear was waiting silently at the edge. Would he make it safely across, Or would this final challenge prove too much for a tired, hungry human? If you were lost in the wilderness and a wild animal seemed to guide you, would you trust it? Why or why not? Henry's heart pounded as he stood at the edge of the sheer drop. The narrow ledge jutted out like a knife along the mountainside, no more than a foot wide in places, with the river roaring far below. Every instinct screamed at him to freeze, but the bear waited a few steps ahead, stationary, calm, almost as if it were silently urging him forward. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his shaking legs. His mind raced with every possible danger. A misstep, slipping on the loose gravel, or losing balance entirely. Yet there was no alternative. The path behind him was blocked by dense undergrowth, and the sun was sinking faster, shadows swallowing the forest. Okay, just one step at a time, he whispered. His boots scraped the rocky ledge, sending tiny stones clattering into the void below. Each step was a test of nerve, but the bear did not move ahead recklessly. It advanced deliberately, pausing now and then to sniff the air or adjust its footing. Henry realized the bear was teaching him patience, teaching him that rushing would be fatal. The wind gusted sharply, nearly throwing him off balance. Henry's hands clutched the rock face, knuckles white. Behind him, the echoing roar of the river made the air vibrate. He froze, thinking the bear might turn away at any moment, but it didn't. Its dark eyes met his briefly, calm and unwavering, and then it continued, a silent signal. Keep moving. Halfway across, a loose rock slid beneath his foot. Heart in his throat, Henry stumbled, arms flailing. The bear stopped instantly, turning to watch him. It didn't approach, didn't make a sound, but the stillness of its presence gave him a strange courage. I have to focus. I have to trust the process. Taking a long, careful breath, he planted his feet firmly, testing each step before moving. The bear's methodical pace became a rhythm he could mirror. Slowly, deliberately, he inched across the ledge, each movement a mix of fear and awe. He felt sweat running down his temple, muscles screaming, but step by step he made progress. When he finally reached the far edge, the bear stopped again, turning its massive head as if to inspect him. Henry collapsed on his knees, gasping, his body trembling from adrenaline and exhaustion. He looked up, no aggression, no threat, just calm. The bear had guided him safely across the treacherous ledge, teaching him more than survival. It had shown him the quiet power of observation, patience, and respect for the natural world. For a few moments they both simply breathed. The forest was eerily quiet, save for the river below. Then, as the light continued to fade, Henry realized a new problem. The path ahead descended steeply into the valley, covered in loose gravel and fallen trees. Without careful guidance, he could easily slip and be trapped or injured. The bear stepped forward, leading him toward a narrow, safer route that hugged the slope instead of plunging directly down. Henry followed, each step still tentative but now fueled by a strange confidence. The bear was not just an animal, it was a teacher, a silent mentor in survival. As darkness crept in, the temperature dropped sharply. Henry's stomach growled. He realized he had no shelter in sight, and the shadows were now long, merging into blackness. The bear paused, glancing back as if reminding him to keep pace, before continuing along a faint game trail that seemed barely visible in the twilight. Then, just as he began to feel a cautious sense of hope, a sudden crack echoed from above. A rock dislodged from the cliff above, tumbling perilously close. Henry froze mid-step, heart hammering. The bear stopped immediately, ears flicking, eyes fixed upward. He could feel the tension in its body, a silent alert. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Henry realized that the path ahead was now a gauntlet of falling rocks and narrow ledges. Even with the bear's guidance, the coming minutes could determine whether he survived or became another casualty of the mountains. Would he make it through the treacherous night, or was the wilderness about to claim him? Darkness descended quickly in the mountains, faster than Henry had anticipated. The last rays of the sun vanished behind jagged peaks, and the forest transformed into an ocean of shadows. Every sound became sharper, the distant rush of the river, a branch snapping under a small animal's weight, the occasional owl hoot. The cold began to bite through his clothes, gnawing at his tired muscles. Henry knew he needed shelter soon. There were no huts, no caves visible in the dim light, just the uneven slope and thick underbrush. He scanned the area desperately, considering climbing back toward the ridge, but the thought of retracing his steps made him shiver. It was getting too dangerous. Then, just as panic threatened to take over, he noticed a silhouette moving slowly ahead. The bear. Calm, steady, seemingly unbothered by the encroaching night. Henry hesitated, then realized it was leading him. Following the bear now felt natural, like instinct guiding instinct. They descended a narrow path where loose gravel threatened to betray each step. Henry moved carefully, mimicking the bear's measured steps. Every time his foot slipped slightly, the bear would pause, glance back, and continue at the pace Henry could manage. Without words, a rhythm formed between them. He began to feel that connection he hadn't expected, a trust built on shared awareness and mutual respect. Hours passed. The darkness deepened. Henry's hands were scraped from clinging to rocks and branches, his body trembling from fatigue and cold. Hunger gnawed sharply, but there was no time to stop for anything but survival. And then, faintly through the thick trees, he saw it. A small clearing with fallen logs arranged naturally like a primitive shelter. The bear paused at the edge, looking back as if to ensure Henry saw it. Relief surged in him, but he knew the challenge wasn't over. Setting up a safe space meant moving cautiously. One misstep could lead to a twisted ankle or worse. He approached the clearing slowly, scanning for unstable branches or hidden hazards. The bear followed, but remained alert, ears flicking, nose twitching, as if it were protecting him silently. Henry built a modest makeshift shelter using fallen branches and a few flat rocks to create a barrier against wind. He huddled inside, shivering, feeling the icy mountain air seeping through the gaps. The bear sat a short distance away, its dark silhouette barely visible against the trees, calm and watchful. Henry realized that for the first time in hours he felt safe, not because of walls but because the bear was near, a constant, guiding presence. The night was long. Every sound startled him, the distant howl of a wolf, the rustling of unseen creatures, the snap of ice breaking in the river below. But the bear never moved far, its watchful eyes reflecting the pale moonlight. Henry began to understand the depth of the unspoken bond forming between them. It wasn't just survival, it was learning to observe, anticipate, and respect nature's rhythms. At some point, exhaustion overtook fear. Henry drifted into a fitful sleep, waking intermittently to the bear's quiet presence. He could feel its breathing, steady and calm, and a strange comfort settled over him. He realized that survival wasn't just about finding the right path, it was about paying attention, being humble, and recognizing the wisdom in the natural world. In the middle of the night, a sudden roar echoed through the valley, closer than anything Henry had heard before. His heart leapt, every muscle tensing. The bear stiffened beside him, ears forward, eyes sharp. Something was approaching. Could they survive this new threat together, or was the wilderness about to test their fragile bond? When faced with fear and uncertainty, how do you decide whether to trust someone, or something unfamiliar? Could animals teach humans lessons about courage and patience? Henry's eyes snapped open at the thunderous roar that echoed through the valley. It wasn't far, too close for comfort. Every hair on his body stood on end. He could feel the bear stiffen beside him, its muscles coiling like a spring. The dark forest seemed to shrink around them, shadows twisting into shapes that didn't exist. The roar came again, longer this time, closer, reverberating through the cliffs. Henry's pulse raced. Wolves? A mountain lion? Or another bear, angry and territorial? He didn't know and he didn't want to guess. One wrong move, one panicked breath could trigger disaster. The bear nudged him gently, low and deliberate. Henry realized it was telling him to stay calm, to move carefully. Every instinct screamed to run, but the bear's calmness gave him courage. I need to trust it, he thought. Slowly he crawled out of the crude shelter, keeping low to avoid making noise. The bear followed silently, moving ahead as a guardian, its eyes scanning the dark forest with uncanny precision. Branches snapped under Henry's weight, sending shivers through him. The roar sounded again, closer, sharper. He froze and the bear's gaze shifted, fixated on something in the shadows. Henry couldn't see it yet, but the bear's body language was unmistakable, it was ready to defend. His heart pounded as adrenaline surged through his veins. The bear moved forward a few steps, growling low, warning whatever lurked in the darkness. Then, almost impossibly, the forest seemed to respond. The roar faded, replaced by cautious, retreating steps. Henry realized the bear had asserted dominance, using its presence to protect him. A wave of gratitude and awe washed over him. This animal, which he had initially feared, had become his protector. They moved carefully along a faint game trail, the moonlight providing sparse illumination. Every step was deliberate. Henry's mind was sharper than it had been for hours. He was learning to observe the smallest signs, a bent branch, a subtle track, the way the air carried scents. Each of these lessons, taught silently by the bear, was now potentially life-saving. Minutes stretched and the danger seemed to recede. The forest returned to its quiet, the river far below now a steady, soothing murmur. Henry paused, realizing how close he had come to panic. He turned to the bear, still alert, ears twitching, eyes scanning, and felt a profound respect. The animal had not simply guided him, it had taught him humility, patience, and vigilance. But exhaustion was catching up. His legs trembled, his stomach growled, and sleep was still hours away. They needed a safer place to wait out the night. Just ahead, he noticed a cluster of large boulders forming a natural alcove. Carefully he approached, testing the ground before stepping. The bear moved beside him, inspecting each potential hazard before settling in a secure spot. Henry crouched in the alcove, shivering, and realized the depth of the unspoken bond forming between them. This was more than survival, it was mutual respect, an understanding that each was relying on the other in a world that demanded attention to every detail. The mountains were unforgiving, but together, they had navigated a night full of hidden perils. Just as Henry began to feel a fragile sense of security, a sharp, almost metallic sound echoed through the alcove, a faint but unmistakable crack above them. The boulders weren't stable. Could they make it through the night without a collapse? Or was the mountain about to test their trust in each other in a way Henry had never imagined? The first faint light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, turning the foggy mountains a muted shade of gold. Henry opened his eyes, exhausted but alive. The night had been relentless, roaring threats, loose rocks, icy winds, but somehow with the bear beside him he had endured. The forest was waking slowly, birds cautiously beginning their morning calls, leaves trembling with the cool breeze. Henry shifted carefully, stretching sore muscles, and glanced at the bear. It was calm, still alert, sitting only a few feet away. The creature had not moved all night except to ensure he remained safe. He felt a surge of gratitude mixed with awe. He realized that the animal's guidance wasn't random. Every step it had taken, every pause, every measured movement had been teaching him how to read the wilderness, how to anticipate danger, how to move with awareness rather than fear. He stood slowly, testing the ground, muscles stiff from exhaustion. The bear rose alongside him, walking a few steps ahead, waiting, scanning the path. Dawn revealed more of the terrain, a narrow game trail that twisted down into the valley. Loose stones that had been invisible in the dark now glinted in the sunlight, and the river that had roared so dangerously yesterday could be seen far below, carving a silver path through the forest. Henry's mind absorbed everything. The bear had led him not just away from danger, but along the safest route, the one that maximized his chances of survival. It had taught him the forest's unspoken rules, to move deliberately, to watch subtle changes in terrain, to respect all living things in the balance of nature. He felt humbled. His previous arrogance, thinking he could conquer the mountains with a map and minimal experience, vanished in the face of this silent teacher. The trail narrowed further, winding between cliffs and ancient pine roots. Henry's legs protested, but he kept moving, matching the bear's calm pace. Every now and then, the bear would pause and glance back, almost checking if he was still following. Henry realized that this was a bond built not on dominance, but on respect and trust. He couldn't just survive the wilderness, he had to listen to it. As they descended, the fog lifted, revealing a small creek meandering through the valley. The bear paused at the bank, sniffed the air, and dipped a paw into the water. Henry knelt nearby, drinking carefully, marveling at how even this simple act was orchestrated to ensure safety. Drinking from a safe spot, avoiding strong currents, minimizing exposure to predators. The lessons were subtle but profound. For the first time since being lost, Henry felt a flicker of hope that he might make it out. He looked at the bear and whispered, almost in disbelief, "I don't know how to thank you. I don't even know your name." Of course, the bear didn't answer, but in its calm, unwavering gaze, Henry felt acknowledgement, as if the creature knew he understood the forest a little better now, as if it had judged him worthy of learning its ways. Just as Henry's confidence began to grow, a rustling in the brush sounded off to the left. It was not the bear, something else, maybe another predator, maybe a human, was approaching. The bear stiffened immediately, growling low and protective. Henry realized that even now, with dawn breaking and the path seemingly clear, the wilderness was unpredictable. Would their trust and teamwork be enough to navigate this next challenge? Henry's heart skipped as the rustling from the brush grew louder. The bear's low growl vibrated through the clearing, a deep, resonant warning. Henry froze, scanning the shadows. His eyes caught movement, another figure larger than any deer, moving cautiously through the undergrowth. He didn't recognize it, and instinct screamed caution. The bear stepped forward slightly, positioning itself between Henry and the approaching figure. Its stance was protective but measured, alert to danger without aggression. Henry realized that the creature's behavior was a lesson. Remain calm, assess, don't panic, and act deliberately. His adrenaline spiked, but he forced his breathing to slow, mirroring the bear's composed rhythm. The movement came closer. A mountain lion? Possibly. Its sleek body slinking through the early morning fog, eyes glinting in the filtered light. Henry's muscles tensed. He wanted to run, but the bear remained a wall of calm. Slowly, deliberately, Henry knelt, making himself smaller, watching every detail: the predator's trajectory, the terrain, the escape routes. The bear let out a soft, deep rumble, enough to make the intruder pause. The mountain lion, cautious but unthreatened, veered away, slinking back into the trees. Henry exhaled sharply, relief washing over him. The bear had once again taught him to read the environment, anticipate danger, and act with measured caution. Survival wasn't just about strength or speed, it was about observation, respect, and timing. As they continued down the valley, the sun climbed higher, burning away the mist and revealing a more navigable path. The trail wound along the river, scattered with rocks and shallow pools, offering Henry a chance to rest while still moving. The bear paused occasionally, ensuring Henry kept up, guiding him around hazards that might have gone unnoticed in his fatigue. Every step became a lesson. Henry noticed subtle signs he had previously ignored: faint tracks of other animals, broken twigs indicating a slope was unstable, the direction of water flow signaling safer crossings. Each insight reinforced the bear's silent teachings. He felt a deepening respect, not just for the bear but for the entire wilderness and its complex balance. Hours passed. They reached a small cluster of trees providing minimal shade but enough for temporary respite. Henry collapsed against a moss-covered boulder, drinking from the river and munching the last of his dried provisions. The bear sat nearby, alert yet calm, almost as if supervising his recovery. He realized that this partnership, built on trust and mutual observation, was saving him in ways he couldn't have imagined. Just as Henry began to feel a cautious optimism, a faint shout echoed from the other side of the river. Human voices, possibly searchers. But the path to reach them was blocked by a sudden, steep drop, too dangerous for a hiker alone. Henry looked at the bear. Could this silent guide help him navigate not only the wild but the chance of rescue? Or was the next challenge going to demand more than courage and trust? The sound of human voices drifted across the valley, faint but unmistakable. Henry's heart leapt. Rescue. But his excitement was tempered by the sight before him. The river, swollen from last night's rain, surged violently over jagged rocks. Crossing it alone would be near impossible, even for someone experienced. Every instinct screamed caution. The bear stepped forward, moving along the riverbank with deliberate, measured steps. Henry watched, realizing it had assessed the safest path before him. He followed carefully, each foot placed exactly where the bear had tested. Stones that seemed slippery or unstable were avoided, hidden pitfalls bypassed, all because the bear's presence revealed the forest's subtle warnings. At one point, a loose log jutted across a small channel. Henry hesitated, feeling the river's force pounding against it. The bear stepped onto the log first, testing its weight, stance firm. The log didn't wobble dangerously. Henry mimicked its steps, keeping low for balance. Each step was a lesson in trust, observation, and calm persistence. Halfway across, a wave of water hit the log. Henry's heart raced, panic threatening to take over. But the bear remained steady, eyes locked ahead. Henry breathed deeply, recalling every lesson: patience, focus, awareness. One step at a time, he adjusted his balance and made it past the wave, his confidence growing with each successful movement. Once across the wider stretch, the river calmed into a shallow pool bordered by smooth stones. Henry stopped, knees trembling, and glanced at the bear. It met his gaze briefly, calm and knowing, before moving along the far bank, waiting for him to continue. He realized that the bear's guidance was more than leading. It was teaching him to survive, to read the world, to trust both instinct and observation. The voices of the rescuers grew louder. Henry's stomach tightened with relief, but a lingering fear remained. The final stretch was still precarious, a series of loose stones and steep banks. The bear paused, glancing back, and Henry understood. Even now he needed to stay fully present, fully aware. One careless step could undo everything. Step by step, Henry advanced, following the bear's precise guidance. The river finally ended at a gentler slope. Sunlight fully pierced the forest canopy, illuminating the path ahead. The voices were clearer now, searchers calling his name. Henry broke into a jog, adrenaline and gratitude surging through him, the bear silently following to ensure the path remained safe. Just as Henry approached the rescuers, a deep rumble echoed from the distant cliffs above, a landslide sending a spray of rocks and dust toward the river path. Could he reach safety in time, or would the final obstacle of the wilderness test their bond and lessons to the limit? The sound of shouting grew louder as Henry sprinted toward the rescuers. Relief surged through him, but the rumble from the cliffs above froze him in place. A small landslide had started, sending rocks and dust cascading down toward the river path. Instinct and adrenaline kicked in simultaneously. The bear stopped at the edge, sniffing the air, ears pricked, assessing the danger. It waited, silently communicating, "Stay calm, follow me." Henry obeyed instinctively, trusting the creature that had guided him through the previous trials. The rocks fell behind them as the bear led Henry through a narrow corridor between boulders and fallen trees, demonstrating again the value of deliberate movement. Each step was cautious but precise. Henry followed, his body trembling but his mind sharp, watching every subtle signal the bear gave, shift of weight, glance, sniff of the air. Halfway through, a larger boulder dislodged, sliding dangerously close. Henry froze, panic clawing at his chest. The bear nudged him forward, moving first, demonstrating the safest path around the obstruction. Heart pounding, Henry mirrored the movements, stepping carefully onto a narrow ledge that hugged the cliffside. Finally, the trail leveled out, and the river's roar softened to a gentle murmur. Sunlight fully broke through the trees, illuminating the rescuers waving their arms from a safe distance. Henry's knees buckled, and the bear paused beside him, watching silently, patient as ever. He looked at the creature with awe. This silent guide had carried him through darkness, danger, and exhaustion, and now he was moments from being safe. The last steps were easy compared to what had come before. Henry emerged into the clearing where the rescuers were waiting, their voices filled with relief and astonishment. He turned back instinctively, expecting the bear to be gone, but it remained at the edge of the forest, calm, its gaze meeting his one final time. No words were exchanged, but Henry understood the unspoken lesson. Respect, observation, trust, and humility had brought him back alive. As the rescuers embraced him, the bear slowly disappeared into the forest. Henry felt a pang of longing, a bittersweet acknowledgement that their journey together had ended, yet the lessons would stay with him forever. Survival wasn't about strength alone, it was about learning, watching, and moving with awareness, and he owed every step of his life to this silent, majestic teacher. As the bear faded into the trees, Henry felt a strange certainty that their paths would cross again someday. But in the moment he was left with a profound question. Had he truly understood the depth of the forest's silent wisdom, or had he only glimpsed a fragment of it? If an unlikely guide showed you the way through life or death danger, would you remember the lessons it taught even after safety? How does observing nature change the way you see your own life? After the chaos of the rescue, Henry sat on a fallen log just outside the clearing, the adrenaline of survival gradually giving way to reflection. The rescuers were busy taking notes, checking his condition, but he felt detached from their chatter, focused entirely on the silent forest beyond the clearing. Somewhere there, the bear waited, or perhaps it had vanished entirely, but its presence lingered in his mind. He thought of the night on the sheer ledge, the frozen river crossing, the protective growl in the dark. Every step, every decision, every ounce of fear and patience had been guided by this silent creature. It was more than a guide, it had been a teacher. For the first time in his life, Henry realized that surviving the wilderness wasn't about conquering it, it was about listening, observing, and respecting its rules. He closed his eyes, recalling the lessons in vivid detail. Patience, waiting, pausing, and observing could prevent disaster. Trust. Sometimes survival requires trusting a guide you do not fully understand. Humility. The forest does not bend to human will, it rewards awareness and respect. Observation. Reading the subtle signs, animal tracks, terrain changes, scents, could mean the difference between life and death. A faint breeze carried the earthy scent of pine and wet soil. Henry breathed it in, feeling a connection he had never experienced before. The bear, he realized, had been a mirror to the wilderness itself, calm, deliberate, attuned to every detail and utterly non-judgmental. He had learned not only to survive but to see. His gaze drifted to the distant forest where the bear had vanished. He whispered a silent thank you, a recognition that their bond had been brief yet transformative. Survival wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional, and spiritual. Respecting the natural world wasn't optional, it was essential. As Henry stood to rejoin the rescuers, a movement in the far tree line caught his eye. Was it just another animal, or was it the bear silently observing, ensuring he truly understood? Henry smiled, knowing the forest held more lessons and that his journey with the bear, though physically over, would resonate for the rest of his life. The rescuers guided Henry back to the main trail, their voices filled with relief and congratulations. But his mind lingered on the forest and the bear that had led him through the wilderness, teaching lessons far deeper than any map or compass ever could. He realized that the bear's guidance wasn't just about survival, it was a profound education in patience, respect, and observation. As the sun climbed higher, warming his exhausted body, Henry reflected on the journey that had begun with panic and fear. Each moment in the wild, each obstacle, had shaped him, not just physically but mentally and spiritually. He had learned to trust instincts, read subtle signs, and embrace humility in the face of forces far greater than himself. The bear had been his silent mentor, its presence a reminder that wisdom sometimes comes without words. The forest behind him seemed quieter now, peaceful and eternal, as if acknowledging the lessons learned. Henry understood that the wilderness would always hold danger, beauty, and lessons for those willing to observe. He would never forget the patience of the bear, its silent guidance, and the clarity it had given him in moments of terror and doubt. As he walked toward the waiting vehicles and the voices of the rescuers, he felt a profound gratitude for the unseen teacher who had guided him. His survival was not just a triumph of courage, but of learning to see, listen, and respect. Nature, he realized, was a patient teacher, if only humans were willing to pay attention. Henry looked back one last time, and in the treeline he thought he saw a dark silhouette pause and watch him. A final acknowledgement, a silent farewell. He smiled, knowing the lessons would stay with him forever. Respect for nature is not just a principle, it is essential for survival. Observation, patience, and humility are the true keys to navigating life's wildest challenges. If nature could teach you silently, what would you hope to learn? Could observing and respecting the world around us save us in ways we never imagined?